The man I have had a crush on for 10 years fell in love with my roommate when we were video chatting and asked me to help him chase her. On the phone, his voice was as deep and pleasant as ever. I have never liked a person like this before, Judy. Please. But I didn't hear a bit of pleading in it. It seemed that he had long been sure that I wouldn't refuse. With me, he has always been confident of success. Sean and my roommate are kissing. They are so inseparable and affectionate. I stared blankly at this scene, and it felt as if my heart had been torn open. Obviously, when I agreed to help him chase my roommate, I had already expected this situation to occur. But when it really happened, I was still surprised and extremely sad. The two were so absorbed in kissing that they didn't notice there was an extra person behind them at all. Come to my place tonight? Sean's voice was hoarsely terrifying in the quiet night. Because of this sentence, my heart instantly dropped into an ice cave and completely froze into ice. So, they have already developed to this extent? My roommate seemed to hit him lightly, with a smile in her voice. What are you thinking? Tonight I promised Judy to help her review her thesis. The two seemed to be leaning against each other's foreheads and talked for a while. From a distance, they still looked very intimate and affectionate. After watching her go upstairs, Sean turned around and finally saw me. Judy? He put away the smile on his face. I turned my face stiffly and didn't dare to look at him. I tried my best to control my emotions and walked towards the dormitory. The scene just now had a great impact on me. Countless sourness and unwillingness filled my heart, almost making me unable to breathe. I have been by Sean's side as a good friend for a full 10 years. I have never seen him show any kindness to any girl. To me, he has always been indifferent and rational. So sober that I even suspect that in his eyes, I may be a playmate with a blurred gender. Just now was the first time I saw him in love. Obviously, they have only known each other for 10 days. Just 10 days. But I have had a crush on Sean for 10 years, almost covering my entire youth. I failed the college entrance examination back then and couldn't go to the same university as him. Later, I repeated a year and finally got in. But because of a mistake in filling out the application form, I was forced to go to another city. During the entire college period, we hardly had any contact. Now that his work has just started on the right track and I am busy with my graduation thesis, we have even less contact. Every time I want to go to see him, he always refuses without hesitation. Judy, I am very busy. Sometimes, I can't help but call him on video. Often, after only a few words, he has to go and be busy again. I know I have no right to complain about him. In his heart, I am just a friend he has known for a relatively long time. Until 10 days ago, my roommate borrowed my phone to take pictures and accidentally flipped to Sean's photo in the album. Her fingers paused slightly, and she smiled. This man is good looking. Judy, do you know him? I clearly saw the interest in her eyes. I didn't answer and barely found an excuse to leave. Even though I knew they probably wouldn't have any intersection, that night, I still couldn't sleep. A strong sense of crisis was about to drown me like a tide. My roommate is recognized as the goddess of the college. That face is bright and charming, pure and seductive. She caused a sensation as soon as she entered school. But she always looks indifferent. She is neither too close nor too distant to people, sometimes hot and sometimes cold. In the 4 years of college, no one could catch her eye. I didn't expect that she would be interested in Sean because of a photo. What's even more unexpected is that when I finally mustered up courage and decided to confess to Sean, who has always been unfeeling and indifferent, fell in love at first sight with my roommate through the phone screen when we were video chatting. I remember his eyes were very bright at that time, and his eyebrows and eyes were curved, as if hiding his originally sharp outline, and there was only one person left in his eyes. I am all too familiar with that look. It was love at first sight. The next day after the video, Sean took the initiative to call me and asked me to help him chase my roommate. On the phone, his voice was as deep and pleasant as ever. I have never liked a person like this before, Judy. Please. That was the first time he begged me, and it was also the first time he called me Judy, but I didn't hear a hint of pleading in it. It seemed that he had long been sure that I wouldn't refuse. With me, he has always been confident of success. Realizing this, a mixture of sourness and depression welled up and spread to every corner of my body. But what can I do? I can't stop him from liking others, just like I can't stop myself from always liking him. As if possessed, I agreed. Agreed to help him set up a connection with my roommate and agreed to be this ridiculous matchmaker. The following things went smoothly. Because of me, they added each other on WeChat and chatted until midnight every day. Sean, who always told me he was very busy, took 3 days off specially to come and see my roommate. Today is their first official meeting. But judging from the situation just now, these two people are already inseparable. Sure enough, the moment I pushed open the dormitory door, my roommate's voice came over. "Judy, I'm with him." "Oh, that's very good," I replied softly, pretending to be nonchalant as I returned to my bed and sat down, opened my computer and revised my thesis. After typing several times in a row, I finally typed the word I correctly. My roommate's tone was full of smiles. "It's all thanks to you, this great matchmaker." My typing hand suddenly tightened, and my heart ached sharply. My fingertips were trembling. Yes, they were brought together by me. It was I who told Sean all my roommate's preferences and suggested what topics he should choose when chatting. It was also I who told my roommate that there had never been any other women around Sean and that he was deeply in love with only her. In these 10 days, I watched Sean show concern for my roommate, watched my roommate talk about Sean and involuntarily smile on her face, and watched them fall in love little by little. Several times late at night, I buried my head deep in the quilt, but still heard his voice on my roommate's phone. "Be good. Don't stay up late. Good night." His breath was vaguely smiling, and the ending sound was deep and sexy. It was the doting and ambiguity that I had never had. That moment, I clearly realized that I regretted it. I even thought that if I had lied to Sean and said that my roommate already had someone else she liked in her heart, with his proud nature, he would definitely give up. Then perhaps I still had a chance. "To thank you." My roommate walked behind me at some point, affectionately put her arm around my shoulder and pulled me back from my thoughts. "Tomorrow Sean and I have decided to invite you to dinner, Judy. You won't refuse, will you?" My heart skipped a beat, and subconsciously I wanted to open my mouth and refuse. But my roommate didn't give me a chance to refuse. "Sean will go back to the company the day after tomorrow. After I get my graduation certificate next month, I will move directly to his place. If nothing unexpected happens, after this meal, the three of us should rarely have a chance to meet again." Saying that, my roommate buried her head in my neck and rubbed against it like a spoiled child. Her warm breath sprayed on my neck. Her tone was very soft and faint. "Judy, this is also his intention." If I still had a glimmer of hope last night, then now, I think I understand what Sean means. In the hot pot restaurant near the school, the bottom of the pot is boiling and steaming. Sean is peeling shrimps for my roommate. He lowers his head slightly. His slender fingers neatly remove the shrimp heads and tails. Every move he makes is full of concentration. I suddenly remember that Sean has obsessive-compulsive disorder about cleanliness. He especially hates the sticky and smooth feeling when peeling shrimps, which makes him feel sick. Last year on his birthday, I took a 4-hour bus ride to find him. I bought a cake and clumsily but wholeheartedly cooked a table full of dishes. I even scalded my hand. When Sean saw the back of my hand, which was extremely red and swollen, his eyes were very complicated. "Judy, you don't have to cook if you can't." But before I could speak, he took my hand, applied ointment, and carefully applied medicine to my scalded area bit by bit. Sean was so gentle to me for a rare occasion. For a moment, I was in a trance and a bit at a loss. Looking at the plate of boiled shrimps on the table, I asked on an impulse, "My hand is not convenient. Can you peel shrimps for me later?" Sean frowned and refused without hesitation. There was even a hint of reproach in his eyes. "Judy, you know I have obsessive-compulsive disorder about cleanliness." With just one sentence, the atmosphere changed completely. If it were in the past, I wouldn't care. But that day, I don't know what happened. I just felt full of grievances, and tears couldn't be controlled and fell down. In the end, regardless of my injured hand and enduring the burning pain, I peeled all the boiled shrimps. And Sean just watched me silently by the side. Several times he wanted to speak, but he said nothing. I pulled my thoughts back from my memory and saw Sean put the peeled shrimps where my roommate could reach easily. Then he took a wet tissue and wiped his hands before slowly looking at me. At the moment when I met his gaze, I finally understood. He did it on purpose for me to see. A small scar was left on the place where I was scalded last year, and there is also a gap between him and me. Now Sean personally tears open this scar and sprinkles salt on the bloody wound. The purpose is to make me give up completely. He has known my feelings for him for a long time. He knows that I don't just regard him as a friend. He invited me to eat. In front of me, he peeled shrimps for my roommate. He is using this way to tell me not to be delusional and not to disturb his life anymore. There was a sudden pain in my heart. I lowered my head and avoided meeting his gaze. My hand holding the chopsticks trembled slightly. This meal seemed extremely long. No matter how much they showed affection, I kept my head down and didn't say much until there was a sudden commotion overhead. I looked up and saw a boy with a flushed face apologizing to Sean. The general meaning is that their table was playing a big adventure game. If they lost, they had to add the WeChat of the most beautiful girl present. He didn't know that my roommate already had a boyfriend. Sean's face was very ugly, but he couldn't lose his temper in public. The boy knew he was in the wrong and said a few more sorries before leaving dejectedly. I turned my head to look at my roommate. My roommate has always loved hot pot, but unfortunately she can't eat spicy food very well. At this time, her beautiful face is slightly red, fine beads of sweat are oozing from her smooth forehead, and her lips are charming. The gazes of many people around were faintly resting on her. There were several boys whose eyes still showed eagerness. In my peripheral vision, I caught a tall and straight figure slowly walking towards this side. The corners of my mouth curved. The knot in my heart seemed to have dissipated a lot. Youth is courageous. Obviously there has been a lesson learned before, but still want to take a chance again. With a stir in my heart, I looked at Sean again. Sure enough, his face became even gloomier. Suddenly, I became interested. I simply put down my chopsticks and raised my arm, completely in a posture of watching a show. Then I saw that when the boy was only 1 meter away from my roommate, he took a long step and bypassed her and walked straight up to me. I was startled. The boy looked at me directly. His eyes were very bright. His face was a little uneasy, but his smile was very clean. "Senior, can I chase you?" I was stunned for a moment and subconsciously looked at Sean. I don't know if it was my illusion, but his face seemed even colder than before. For a moment, many thoughts and images flashed through my mind. During this one-sided pursuit that lasted for 10 years, I was not without wavering. I had witnessed with my own eyes how Sean refused those girls who confessed to him. His methods were crisp and neat, leaving almost no leeway. So I carefully held my love for him, endured without revealing it, and was willing to be his gentle and considerate friend. But a cavity of enthusiasm received no response at all. What I got was always his coldness and restraint. Over time, the pain and exhaustion of unrequited love almost overwhelmed me. At that time, when I learned that I hadn't been admitted to the same university as him, the long accumulated emotions reached their peak at that moment, and for the first time, I had the thought of giving up. On the day of the farewell dinner, he didn't come. At the end, a male classmate confessed to me. After I refused, the male classmate looked very disappointed but still insisted on offering to take me home. I thought about it. Going back to my home would definitely pass by Sean's house. Somehow, I agreed. That night's moonlight was beautiful. The male classmate walked side by side with me, trying to find topics. I would respond seriously to every word he said until that familiar gate crashed into my sight. I couldn't help but stop in my tracks. Looking up, I saw Sean standing on the balcony, staring coldly at us. After returning home, when I finished taking a bath and was lying in bed playing with my phone, I found that someone had recorded the video of the male classmate confessing to me and posted it in the class group. It was too noisy in the video to hear the sound. At the end of the picture, I left the box with him. Suddenly realizing that in that meal that I didn't want to stay in for even a second, there was such a person who had been silently watching me not far away. He saw the embarrassment and awkwardness that I couldn't put into words, saw the loneliness and desolation that I tried my best to hide, so he took me away. I felt as if my heart had been touched. Eating desserts really does make people feel better. All day long, I was in a very good mood. In the evening, I walked on the playground with Zach. The wind blew the hem of my clothes. The setting sun dyed the clouds fiery red and layered them on top of each other. Zach carefully took my hand. I tilted my head to look at him and could only see his fair half-profile and the ear tips dyed red by the setting sun. This good mood continued until Sean sent me a WeChat message asking where I was now. I didn't reply. He didn't ask again either. I took a deep breath, as if to exhale all the pent-up frustration over the years. I stayed with Zach until very late before returning to the dormitory. After washing up, I started to revise my thesis. Only after completely revising the thesis and adjusting the format again and sending it to the tutor from the email did I turn on my phone. At 11 o'clock at night, Zach sent me a WeChat message asking if I was free tomorrow. After hesitating for a moment, I replied, "I am free tomorrow." He quickly replied, "good night." I was stunned for a moment and looked at the time. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I stared at that WeChat message for a while, and suddenly thought of something and curved my lips and smiled. After drinking a cup of milk, I was about to go to sleep when I suddenly found that my roommate's bed was empty and the quilt was neatly folded. Tonight, my roommate didn't come back. The next day, I slept until 10 o'clock in the morning. After getting up and washing up, I started to put on makeup in front of the mirror. When I was finally applying lipstick, I suddenly heard the sound of a key opening the door. It was my roommate who came back. I stared at myself in the mirror, with calm eyebrows and eyes without the slightest fluctuation. Clearly the last time I caught them kissing, my heart ached so much that I could hardly breathe. It felt like my whole body was taken apart and reorganized, my bones were crushed and then put back together piece by piece. But last night when I knew that they were together and might be doing even more intimate things, except for a little bit of soreness in my heart, the heart-wrenching pain I had imagined didn't come. I even fell asleep soon and had a dreamless night. I don't know if this means that I have finally let go of Sean and let myself go, but I understand that this is a good beginning. I pursed my lips and smoothed out the lipstick little by little. My roommate's slightly tired voice came from my ear, "He has returned to the company." I turned my head and found that my roommate's face was pale and she looked extremely haggard. I looked at her in surprise and stretched out my hand to feel if her forehead was hot. But my roommate turned her face away and dodged my touch. "I'm fine." I frowned tightly. My roommate stared at me intently and said in a somewhat difficult voice, "I slept with him." I looked at her and didn't speak anymore. After a long time, a very complicated emotion suddenly appeared on my roommate's face. "Judy, is there a possibility for you and Zach?" I was silent, but I was seriously thinking about this possibility. After a while, I raised my eyes to meet her gaze and smiled. "Yes." My roommate was slightly stunned. The gloom in her eyes faded away and was replaced by a relieved ease. When going downstairs, I found Zach waiting for me at the door of the dormitory. He was holding soy milk and steamed buns in his left hand and porridge in his right hand. With broad shoulders and long legs, standing there was like a human-shaped billboard, which really attracted the attention of many girls. I walked over and said, "When did you come?" When Zach saw me, his long eyelashes drooped and he said with a blush on his face, "I haven't been waiting for long." Immediately he said again, "I bought 2 kinds of breakfast. You pick first and I'll eat the other one." I casually glanced at it and said, "I want to have porridge." After saying that, I was stunned. Zach was also stunned. His burning gaze fell on my face. His Adam's apple rolled slightly and his face became even redder. I didn't expect that the place Zach took me to was the aquarium. The lighting inside the aquarium is very dim. On both sides of the walkway are simulated seaweeds and corals. There are many fish hovering near the tunnel, seemingly curious about humans. I tapped on the glass of the water tank. A small transparent jellyfish suddenly swam away. I couldn't help but curve the corner of my mouth. When I turned my head to talk to Zach, I found that he was taking pictures of me with his phone. I raised my eyebrows and leaned over. "Let me see." The photo is a half-length portrait. The girl is wearing a white dress. The skin exposed at the collarbone and shoulders is fair and translucent. It contrasts beautifully with the blue sea water. A few strands of hair are slightly fluttering, giving a natural and messy beauty. It can be seen that the person who took the snapshot is very good at taking pictures. The lighting is well handled and the angle chosen is also very good. I turned my head sideways and smiled. "So you are so good at taking pictures." The words suddenly stopped. Zach's eyes are very deep. He is looking at me from a very close distance. So close that I can feel his tense body, his scorching breath, and the pleasant smell on him. Suddenly, I felt my face burning and my breathing suddenly became rapid. At around 6:30, Zach and I chose to take a bus back to school. The window was open and there was the whistling wind by my ears. From time to time, the scene of Zach's lips almost brushing past but restrainedly turning away just now came to my mind. At that time, he was breathing slightly and told me very seriously that he could wait. I couldn't help but turn my head and found Zach sitting up straight and primly, looking straight ahead. With an appearance of a gentleman. I also remembered that after returning to the dormitory last night, I specifically went to the school's bulletin board and searched for his name. I found many confession posts from girls. Some people also wrote his information in detail, including what competitions he had participated in and what awards he had won. After looking at him for a while, I suddenly said, "Why do you like me?" Zach seemed unexpected that I would ask this and couldn't help but be stunned. I stared into his eyes and bit my lip tightly. You are very excellent. Why do you like me? Zach's handsome eyebrows were tightly knitted together. There was a seriousness on his face that I had never seen before. Senior, why do you think like that? I looked at him without speaking. Zach's lips were slightly pursed and tense. After a while, he sighed. The first time I saw you was not in the hot pot restaurant. It was in the aquarium. I was stunned. Aquarium? Zach said and said in a low voice. That day you were holding 2 strings of candied haws in your hand and seemed to be waiting for someone. I watched your expression change from expectation to disappointment little by little. Until a little girl accidentally bumped into you. The little girl covered her nose and cried loudly in pain. You squatted down and hurriedly took out a tissue to wipe her tears. While wiping, your tears also couldn't stop flowing down. In this way, you and the little girl were crying and taking turns using tissues to wipe each other's tears. After crying until you were exhausted, you shared and ate 1 string of candied haws each. What you gave people the feeling at that time. Zach paused for a moment. Thinking of something, his face turned red again. Both pitiful and lovely. I lowered my eyes and my face was inexplicably hot. I remembered that at that time, Sean happened to be on a business trip here. On the day he finished his work and was about to go back, he promised to spare some time to accompany me to the aquarium. I waited for him happily for a long time, but what I got was a text message from him breaking his promise. Sorry, I got up late. I'm afraid I won't be able to catch the high-speed train. I'll leave first. Sean would never disrupt his plan for me. I looked up at Zach. I just didn't expect that he had known me since that time. Zach looked at me, his gaze gentle. Later, when the college held a special lecture, I saw you speaking on the stage. Only then did I know that you were Judy, a senior in the finance department. It was already after 9 o'clock in the evening when I returned to the dormitory. The dormitory was not lit, and it was pitch dark all around. My roommate seemed to go to bed exceptionally early today. I didn't turn on the light either. I closed my eyes and buried my face in the pillow. The surging emotions in my heart were almost uncontrollable. Today I realized that all these years of chasing after Sean, I had always been self-abased. Even though I had done very well, his repeated indifference and neglect, and his occasional teasing all exhausted me mentally and physically. I even constantly doubted and denied myself. Just like a worm trapped in its own cocoon, I tightly sealed myself up, timid and unable to see a glimmer of light. I never thought that a person named Zach would appear and slowly and solemnly tell me, "You are very good. Why can't I like you?" Somewhere in my heart seemed to be scalded. Then slowly, a little warmth spread. I took a deep breath, sat up, opened WeChat and posted a moment. The text was "You are also very good." And the picture was the one taken by Zach today. In a few seconds, I received a WeChat message from Sean, "Did you take him to that aquarium?" Immediately followed by the second one, "Are you with him?" The accusations in these 2 sentences were too obvious, and there was even a subtle hint of jealousy. My heart skipped a beat. The next second, Sean directly called. Looking at the number on the phone screen that was already so familiar that it was engraved deep in my bones and on my heart, I frowned. In the past, I could be happy for half a day just because he sent me an extremely perfunctory WeChat message. Now that he took the initiative to call, I had a strange resistance in my heart. It seemed that I had even lost interest in talking to him. I stared at that string of numbers for a few seconds, silently lowered my eyes and pressed to hang up. The phone rang several times in succession, and I hung up without hesitation. After several repetitions, I was a little impatient and typed, "I am in the dormitory now. Your girlfriend is sleeping." This sentence seemed to be some kind of switch. Sean finally calmed down. In the following time, Zach and I got closer and closer. We ate together every day, went to the library to read books, took a walk on the playground, and watched newly released movies. Gradually, I became more and more familiar with him. Now even if we don't talk, we don't feel awkward. But when we chat, there are many things to talk about. And our relationship is like one that is separated by only a thin layer of paper that hasn't been pierced. On the contrary, it seemed that there was some problem between Sean and my roommate. Now I seldom see them call each other. The previous sticky feeling disappeared completely like the ebb tide. My roommate seemed nonchalant and talked and laughed on the surface, but I heard her suppressed sobs several times late at night. I could probably guess that it might be because of me. After much hesitation, I took Sean out of the blacklist and called him. The call was connected quickly. Hearing his somewhat hoarse voice, the words I had prepared were suddenly stuck in my throat. He said, "Judy, you finally answered my call. I was in a trance for a moment. This sentence, I used to say to him often. But at that time, my tone was even more cautious and helpless. It was like gouging out pride and self-esteem from my bones, crushing them inch by inch, and then being humble to the dust. Fortunately, someone appeared in time and pulled me out. The image of Zach's handsome and gentle face flashed through my mind, and I unconsciously curved the corners of my lips. "Judy, are you listening?" Sean's voice was even hoarser. I came to my senses. "What did you say just now?" There was silence on the other end. I thought for a while and said calmly, "Sean, I have liked you for 10 years. There came a heavy breathing sound from the other end. After a moment, Sean said, "I know." Although I had already guessed it in my heart, when I heard him admit it personally, my heart still ached violently for a moment, as if pierced by some blunt instrument. It wasn't because of him, but for my obscure, joke-like 10-year unrequited love. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "But after that meal, I found that I don't like you anymore. Now I only have blessings for you guys. And there is also someone by my side whom I want to hold tightly and never let go." I sighed slightly and continued, "Sean, we should all cherish the person beside us." This time Sean was silent for even longer. So long that when I thought he wouldn't speak again, he slowly asked me in a certain and relieved tone, "Judy, are you with him to get revenge on me?" I was a bit frustrated by Sean's words. It wasn't because I was guilty or in a state of embarrassment of being seen through. It was really just that I was depressed and blocked in my heart. I was thinking, how humble and without dignity have I been in these 10 years that Sean so naturally thinks that I would sacrifice my feelings to get revenge on him. Although I blocked him again after he said that sentence, I was still very depressed. On this day, after Zach and I finished watching a movie and were almost at the door of the dormitory, that sentence flashed through my mind again. I was in a trance for a moment, tripped over a stone under my feet, and almost fell when my knee bent. Fortunately, a pair of hands beside me firmly supported me. Meeting Zach's worried gaze, I smiled at him. At this moment, a sudden twinge of pain came from my ankle. I subconsciously gasped. "Sprained ankle?" Zach frowned. I nodded. Zach helped me sit down on the bench beside and held up my foot to check the injury. "Fortunately, there is no dislocation. Senior, let me rub it for you." Before I could react, the next moment a cool touch came from my ankle. He gently grabbed my ankle and kneaded it with gentle and rhythmic fingers. There was a slight numbness. I let out a short "ah." Zach suddenly paused. From my perspective, I could see his Adam's apple roll slightly. I couldn't help but feel my face getting hot. Finally, the pain at my ankle slowly dissipated. I heard Zach ask in a low voice, "Senior, does it still hurt?" "No, it doesn't hurt anymore." When I spoke, I found that my throat was a bit hoarse. Zach seemed to smile. He gently put down my foot and looked up at me. Under the moonlight, his eyes were very deep, his nose was very straight, his lip color was very red, and his gaze was calm and focused. Looking at him, a thought suddenly popped into my mind. It's over. I don't know who took the initiative first, or who responded to whom. In an instant, I had already put my arms around his neck, and his hands were holding my waist. "This is our first kiss. I don't know how long it has passed." He retreated a little distance and was breathing heavily. The gaze falling on my face was so hot that it almost melted me. Jing jing. At a certain nerve in my mind, with his extremely soft murmur, with a snap, it completely snapped. I opened my lips, wanting to say something, but suddenly my arm was grabbed by a big hand and I was forcefully pulled off the bench. I groaned in pain. Turning my head, I was just facing a pair of familiar, bloodshot eyes. To be honest, seeing that it was Sean, I was really a bit surprised. Especially now that his face is livid and his eyes are full of shock and anger, as if I had done something wrong to him. I just find it absurd and ridiculous. He is used to my unwavering dedication for 10 years, used to my unrequited kindness. When I am no longer humble and compromising, when my eyes are no longer on him, he feels uncomfortable again. What's even more ridiculous is that he can be distant and indifferent to me, draw a clear line, but he doesn't allow me to take the initiative to let go and extricate myself from hopeless indulgence. It seems that he can't bear to see me live well. The arm held by Sean was filled with an uncomfortable feeling. I glanced at it and sure enough, it was red. I moved my arm, but he held it even tighter, not giving me any chance to break free. He looked at me for a while, then his gaze shifted and he stared fiercely at Zach. There were intense emotions churning in his eyes, as if he wanted to eat him. I frowned and slightly turned sideways to block in front of Zach. Sean was stunned for a moment, his eyes became even redder. After looking at me for a long time, he hoarsely said, "Judy, we have known each other for 10 years. How long have you known him? And you protect him like this?" I looked at him and said in a faint voice, "Zach is my boyfriend." Sean froze on the spot all of a sudden. Looking at his pale lips, I reminded him, "You're hurting my hand very much." Sean came to his senses and slowly released my arm. The moment he let go, suddenly I lost my balance under my feet. I staggered and fell into Zach's arms, who just happened to reach out on my right. A piercing pain hit from my ankle. Looking at my swollen ankle, I realized that being pulled by Sean from the bench just now seemed to have really caused a dislocation. I suddenly wanted to laugh, and then I really did laugh. Sean looked at my ankle and obviously realized something. There was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. After a long time, he moved his lips. "Sorry." I didn't want to pay attention to him anymore. I pulled Zach's sleeve and said, "Take me to the hospital." Zach immediately nodded and squatted down in front of me. "I'll carry you on my back." Just as I was about to climb up, a hand suddenly stretched out but suddenly paused. The fingertips trembled and stopped a few millimeters away from my wrist. I looked up and met Sean's gaze. These cold eyes were now stupid and a little dazed. After a while, he withdrew his hand and said in a hoarse voice, "Judy, I'll drive you to the hospital." I quickly refused. "No need to trouble you. Thank you." After saying that, I leaned on Zach's shoulder and put my arms around his neck and let him carry me on his back. When I reached the corner, I took a look at Sean behind me. He was wearing a white shirt and black trousers. Standing there motionless and watching us, he was tall and slender but also exuded a strong sense of desolation. Taking a taxi to a nearby hospital, the doctor put my bone back in place, prescribed some blood-activating and stasis-dispersing medicine, then swept his indifferent gaze over Zach and me once and told me to be sure to rest for half a month and not do any strenuous exercise. Until I got off the taxi, my face was still red. I gently pressed my face against Zach's back, feeling his body temperature. I heard him say, "Senior, during this time, move to the house I rent first." The doctor's words just now instantly flashed through my mind. My heart was pounding. Live with you?" Zach paused for a moment, his tone full of smiles. "What I mean is, your dormitory is on the 4th floor. You are injured on your foot now and it's not convenient to climb stairs. The house I rent has an elevator and the environment is also okay. Move to my place. I can take care of you during the day. As for at night," Zach chuckled softly. "I'll move back to the dormitory." My face flushed instantly and I uttered a soft Back at the dormitory entrance again, it was already around 11:30. Unexpectedly, Sean hadn't left yet. When he saw me, he opened his mouth as if to say something. I frowned and turned my head aside. As we passed by him, Zach suddenly said, "Jingjing, just pack a few clothes simply tonight. I have everything else at home. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning." I turned my face slightly and caught a glimpse of Sean's body trembling violently. "Okay," I said. When my roommate heard that I was going to move to the house Zach rented, she wasn't very surprised. She just smiled and said, "Zach is a very good person." Looking at her face that was gradually regaining its radiance, I asked, "You and broken up?" As if she knew what I was going to ask, her face was very calm and there was no change in her eyes at all. "From that night when he called you 13 times, I decided not to like him anymore. The next day I proposed a breakup." I was stunned for a moment. "How do you know?" I clearly didn't answer the calls. My roommate pursed her lips and said, "I accidentally discovered before that you set a special ringtone of Love Story for his calls." I was silent and didn't speak. She smiled. Later, this ringtone never rang again. "You must have changed it or blocked him." I nodded. That night, I not only blocked him but also changed the ringtone to go away. My roommate's gaze lingered on my face for a long time. Finally, she sighed slightly. "Judy, he doesn't deserve my love, nor does he deserve yours. It has to be said that Zach is really good at taking care of people, at least he is very good at taking care of me. In just over half a month of living in his house, apart from preparing for my graduation defense, I just played games and ate the meals Zach cooked. I have gained several pounds." I put down the mirror with a look of deep distress and looked up at Zach, who was peeling an orange for me. He had been running back and forth between the dormitory and here these days. His face had become much thinner and his contour lines were smooth and incredibly handsome. I blinked and pounced over, burying my face in Zach's arms and muttering, "After my foot is completely healed, I must lose weight." Zach smiled without expressing an opinion and fed a slice of orange into my mouth. Suddenly, there was a heavy rainstorm at night. At the moment Zach went out with an umbrella, I closed my eyes and said in a low voice, "Don't go back tonight." Zach stared at me for a while. Seeing that I didn't add any regretful words, the hand holding the umbrella handle tightened and he replied hoarsely, "Okay." In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a muffled thunder. Turning my head, Zach beside me was still sleeping deeply. I curved my lips and was about to go back to sleep. But when I looked up, I found that the window wasn't closed tightly. The drizzle outside was drifting in through the window. Last time, Zach was afraid that I might bump into something, so he bought me plaster shoes online. But my foot injury wasn't extremely serious. In these half a month, it has almost healed. So now I can walk several steps without wearing plaster shoes. I put on my nightgown and was about to close the window when I glanced downstairs unintentionally and saw a familiar figure. My fingers paused. The night was very deep and darkness enveloped. By the faint streetlight, I saw his pale face and the flickering of the cigarette between his fingertips. He was smoking. I have liked Sean for 10 years. I know that he generally doesn't smoke. Only when he is in an irritable mood and at his most agitated will he smoke like that. During this period, I could see his figure appear near my house every weekend. He was so idle that it gave me the illusion that he was unemployed. I knew Sean had also seen me. But I didn't want to look at him anymore. After closing the window and drawing the curtain, I slowly walked to the living room and poured myself a glass of water. Then, I heard the mobile phone I put on the living room table last night ring. It was an unfamiliar number. I was silent for a while, sighed, and still answered it. The voice on the phone was deep and hoarse, with a hint of confusion and forbearance. He didn't say anything but just repeatedly called my name, Judy, Judy. Suddenly I felt a little sad. This kind of sadness is not heartache, nor pain or loathing. Instead, there is a momentary dryness in the heart, as if only the word sadness can describe it. I suddenly remembered that lyric in Love Story, "'Cause we were both young when I first saw you." Because when I first saw you, we were both very young. At first sight, I was attracted by that cold and taciturn teenager. I would pretend to pass by his classroom door inadvertently and would spend all day and night memorizing words and studying hard just to be admitted to his class. At that time, I didn't care about the result. As long as I could take a distant look, I would be filled with joy. Later, I was cautious and full of worries about gains and losses, looking up to him like looking up to a god. And he neither refused nor approached. Slowly, I found that the harm he brought me was almost on an equal footing with the amazement and strength he brought me at the beginning. Now all my feelings for him at this moment, when he calls my name again and again, miraculously disappear completely. Finally, I heard my own voice, "Sean, I really, really liked you very much once, but now, I really, really don't love you anymore." After hanging up the phone, I went back to bed and lay down. Suddenly, an arm wrapped around my waist and pulled me over. I leaned my head on his chest. "There is a new chain store of fish noodle downstairs. I heard it's a 10-year-old store with delicious taste and a super large number of repeat customers. How about we go and try this for breakfast tomorrow?" Zach's tone was very calm, but I still detected a hint of gritted teeth. I raised my eyebrows and hurriedly said, "No, no, no." Zach paused for a moment, ruffled my hair and said, "Why, don't you like fish noodle?" I raised my face, reached out and hooked his neck and said with a suppressed smile, "Yes, I don't like it. I just like having porridge."